Ow!
Greetings, YouTube. This is Dad Crash, better known as Brandon, and welcome to the new and improved Brandon's Book Review, where I'm going to be doing read alouds of the book reviews of books that I've enjoyed and books that I've, of course, reviewed on my blog site, which I will have a link to down in the doobly doo. And before we begin, I think that I'm going to start this off with a little bit of a shameless plug for some of my books. Or if somebody ever has a book that I've read or one that I've reviewed before, I'll probably do a shameless plug for that book. But I want to go ahead and start off with mine because I want to kind of get the love out there, see if anybody gets interested. So the book that I'm focusing on for my little shameless plug is The Tribute King. It is my most recently released book, available in Kindle and paperback on Amazon. I will have a link to that, of course, down in the doobly-doo. And the plot is as follows. For the desert tribes, the only abundant source of water alongside the holdings of their mortal enemies in the north is the subterranean Greylands, inhabited by the half-serpent Naga, to whom the tribes pay annual tribute for use of the precious resource. But every 2 centuries, the right of flesh is invoked, the provision of human mates for the Naga. The law of tribute is sacrosanct, and those who make the trip to the Greylands are never seen again. Special exception has been made for the spoiled Prince Vorin of Fire Mountain. Prone to boorish recklessness and arrogance, a singular farce too far runs him afoul of his father, who exiles the foolish prince from his opulent desert citadel to the water-rich Greylands as part of the flesh tribute. Rather than a life sentence, his father brokers a deal with the Naga High King to a tenure of 3 years in that sunless kingdom as the husband of Salgani, the blind Naga High Princess. Trapped in a detestable situation, Vorin is faced with the consequences of his wasted life and the decisions that come with it. Will he hold on to his immaturity, or become the truly noble prince that he was meant to be and find the love with the shrewd princess in time to save her world from a sleeping threat that his enemies, in their hatred, would use to destroy everything? If you enjoy sort of a reverse Beauty and the Beast story, I'd highly recommend checking this out. Also, I think it's very unique fantasy, which no one really knows. I came up with from a dream I had. The cover itself was designed by yours truly, and of course, the book completely written by yours truly. It's my hope that you go ahead and pick it up, and of course, as always, leave a review. Even if you didn't like it, feedback always means a lot to me. And so, now that we're done with that, let's get down to brass tacks. I've decided to kick off this restart of my book review series with a review of a recent book that I've read that I highly enjoyed. It is a book that I wish I remembered how I came to knowledge of it, but the concept of the story was quite intriguing, and so I was naturally drawn to it. Some stories with a supernatural bend I really do like, and I'm kind of one of those odd ducks that really can't tell what kind of book I'm going to like. I just got to taste it and see if I'm going to enjoy it. But there are certain types of books that might turn me off. I guess there must have to be an element that just really catches me. I can't really say that I have a absolute favorite subgenre of science fiction or fantasy that I will always read no matter what. It just has to be a story that catches my eye. I'm just one of those kinds of people. And so the story that I'm going to be talking about today is called Death's Widow by Lori Eiling. I think that's how you pronounce her name, or Eisling. If you are listening to this podcast, Lori, I deeply apologize if I botched your last name. I did have a little bit of a back and forth with her, and she was very happy that I did this review. So I wanted to go ahead and do a read aloud. Now, as I said, I have this review posted on my WordPress book review page. For those of you who are interested in checking it out there instead of listening to my dulcet tones, you can find it at authorbrandonhill.wordpress.com. As I said before, I will leave a link in the doobly-doo. So here's my review of it. I said, I find new books to read in diverse places on the internet, from social media to recommendations by family, friends, and people in various author groups, so much so that unless I'm familiar with the author, I often forget where I learned about my current literary interest. But in my book, no pun intended, that matters very little, especially if I feel that the story is worthwhile. If I can invest my interest in the story, then no matter where I made it, I consider the decision to read it a decision well made. Such was the case with Death's Widow, a romantic fantasy by Laurie Eiling. Apparently the first volume in what appears to be a burgeoning series entitled Tales of the Timeless. An intriguing name for an intriguing set of literary fare, involving the tales of romance, love, and loss, which begins in the afterlife and will certainly invest the romantically inclined who is looking for sensual, erotic moments, compelling characters, and a story that traverses worlds of pure imagination. Think the most moving romantic novel you have ever read, mixed in with a bit of What Dreams May Come, and you pretty much have this book in a nutshell. Little side note, if you haven't seen What Dreams May Come, watch that movie. It is fantastic, and it stars Robin Williams. You can't go wrong. Also, based on a book by the same guy that did I Am Legend. His name escapes me right at the moment. Anyway, but of course, that sort of depiction is rather pithy, and this is a deep dive. Amara Rush, a dying woman in a hospital bed suffering the final stages of terminal cancer, can only reflect on what she will leave behind until death at last comes for her, and he becomes her eternity. Captivated by the silver-eyed, compassionate Callan, who wears the cloak and wields the scythe of death, she is taken to his abode in the realms of the timeless, an act that runs against the celestial order, but death, the most powerful of the celestial powers that be, and keeper of the balance between heaven and hell, is used to doing things his way. Drawn to the gentle and loving Callan as inexorably as he is drawn to her, Amara is given perfect health and a body that will never age or decay. She accepts his offer to be his eternally bonded spouse, and for a time, save for the grumbling and pleas of rather petulant angels, their lives are happy. Sharing the incredible sway, strength, and power that Callan wields, Amara's marriage to death and position as his equal ruffles the feathers of quite a few celestial and infernal denizens, resulting in a few rather unpleasant encounters with overzealous angels and a multitude of revelations that enlighten Amara to the reality that the afterlife is not at all like she was led to believe. But when her husband one day vanishes and her bond is all but severed, her life and the fate of heaven and hell, from celestial hosts to foul demons, are all placed in the balance. Now inheriting her late husband's responsibilities, Amara, a grieving widow, becomes death and vows to stop at nothing until she uncovers the fate of her beloved Callan. Death's Widow is one of those books that begins on a somber and even melancholy note out of necessity, featuring the slow, painful ebbing of life from a disease such as cancer from the victim's viewpoint, and the reader is made to feel every excruciating moment. But at the moment of death, the story becomes an almost surreal odyssey for Amara, now in the company of Callan, who is presented as quite possibly the perfect husband, or perhaps merely a dream come true for any woman. Kind, doting, sensuous, never condescending or conceited, both sinfully handsome and fabulously wealthy, and a 10 out of 10 in bed. Amara feels that she has won the jackpot in spite of her having found the perfect mate, and in spite of it all having happened after she passed on. Even their shortcomings, chiefly their possessive nature for each other, are used as advantages in the ensuing events, leading to the display of her vengeful side. This is a truly frightening spectacle to behold, seeing her tear through damned souls and blessed cherubim alike in the frenzy of near madness the loss of her husband has brought her to. The worlds of the afterlife are also something that Eiling crafts with superb skill and a bit of biting irony. Considering what we perceive to be so good and lovely about the eternal abode of the blessed and the chaos of the damned is not quite what we think it is, both by way of Death's lessons to Amara as she comes to understand her new situation, and their interactions with angels like the kindly and brutally honest Jeremiah, the overly amorous Jophiel, who harbors an unhealthy attachment to Callan and most other men, and Sandalphon, who is, for all intents and purposes, kind of a douche, but thankfully not a hopeless case. And then there's Lucifer. I think that Eiling hit the proverbial nail on the head with how seductive she made the Prince of Darkness out to be, as he possesses all the charm and charisma of James Bond and just the right amount of honesty that hits in ways to let you know that one day he will lie to you in the most vicious way possible, and you will probably never even realize it. And yet, his acts of perceived kindness to Amara are almost convincing until he's not. But the less I say about him, the better, as some parts where Amara must rely on his unique brand of assistance are not for the faint of heart. And yet, the new bearer of the cloak and scythe must count on Lucifer as well as angels, whose trustworthiness is put into serious doubt as she shakes the realms of heaven, hell, and all those in between to find her lost husband. It is a search with twists, turns, and danger that leads down multiple rabbit holes of speculation until the truth is revealed in a moment that is both stunning and, on some retrospective, almost laughably simple. And in the end, Eiling wraps it up with a bow so bittersweet it will leave you misty-eyed and with an ears-wide grin on your face. Remember how I mentioned what dreams may come? Well, you'll understand when you get there, provided you've seen the movie. It's a good thing when I have to really struggle to figure out any flaws in a work outside of occasional minor spelling/grammar hiccups that are common in most self-published works. Death's Widow is unfortunately marred by a few of these, but not to a distracting degree. Perhaps the only other criticism I would even have for this is that the steamy scenes could have been toned down, as they are far between and, outside of describing part of Amara and Callan's relationship, aren't terribly helpful in moving the story along. But then again, juxtaposed against Lucifer's nature and a particular promise that Amara is forced to make with him, it can be useful in presenting Callan's love versus Lucifer's naked lust. Perhaps it is a matter of personal taste, though anyone who's read my other reviews knows that I'm certainly not a prude. In this tale of love and eternal and pushing impossible boundaries for a loved one, Eiling hits all the right notes to weave a tale that has not only intellectually engrossed me, but emotionally captivated me. And though I suffered nowhere near the level of devastation that seized me when I read my perennial favorite ugly cry book, The Shattered Sky, the pain of Amara's loss that fueled her fire for revenge to near madness was something that I felt throughout the story's entirety, and I felt the hope, frustration, anguish, loneliness, and terror as Amara tears to the dead ends of obfuscation laid by disgruntled angels and demons to find a way to be reunited with death. And I was hooked throughout the entire journey. I've recently discovered that Eiling has written a second book in this world, and I'm looking forward to tearing into it as well, with a potential second review in the series down the pipe. And so, the fantasy fan who wants an interesting take on elements of Christian mythos, as well as a passionately romantic and emotionally captivating tale, this is a book you would do well to take time out and read. So on the scale of 1 to 10, I gave this a 9. Highly recommended. Now, a little side note, everybody. I did read her next book, but that will be coming in my next review. And trust me, it is a massive tonal shift. A little bit of a side note. In a lot of these reviews, when I go over the negative points of books, usually it ends up talking mostly about typos that I see or grammar hiccups, chiefly because many of these books that I read are either published through a small-time publisher or self-published. And that's a common thing that I see among self-published works, is that they tend to have grammatical issues, a lot more than a professionally published book. And now, that is not to say that the books aren't good. It's rare that it's to a level of distraction that can make the book absolutely unreadable. There's one book in all my reviews that I have read, and I was really hard up for reading in. I was actually really excited because it looked like something I was going to be really interested in, and when I read it, it ended up being a massive disappointment, specifically just because it ended up just being so full of typos and problems. And it's not just typos, but also just issues that made the book feel like a first draft. And so I just couldn't read the rest of the series. Now, I will talk about this book in a later review. But for right now, I just wanted to focus on this one particular book. I loved it, everybody, and like I said, I hope that if you like these kinds of books, romantic type stories, a little sexy, little with that supernatural element in there, you're probably gonna love this Tales of the Timeless, and definitely the book that she wrote afterwards, titled Darkest Deeds, which will be a focus for my next book review. So a little bit of spoilers there. Thank you everyone for listening. If you still are, as always, like I said, come to my book review page, authorbrandonhill.wordpress.com. It is my hope also that you may check out the book that I have plugged in the beginning. Once again, the title is The Tribute King. For both things, I will have a link down in the doobly-doo. Also, I even have a free offering of the first 2 chapters of my book, which I will also provide a link to down in the doobly-doo. Thank you once again, everyone, for listening in to my dulcet tones. And until next time, this is Dad Crash saying stay lucky, stay blessed, and happy